Most of Malifaux takes place in the city of Malifaux, but how much do we actually know about it? When the breach reopened, the guild began pushing into the city, securing different parts, and claiming them for themselves. At some point, they decided not to expand any further, because they needed to focus their priorities elsewhere, and didn't really care if the poor people had enough space to live. They then built a wall around the areas they'd already captured, and called everything outside of it the quarantine zone, and prevented anyone from entering, claiming that it was dangerous. At the time that wasn't true, but pretty soon, all sorts of horrible things would call the quarantine zone home. Since that time, the city has roughly looked like this. Downtown Malifaux is where all the rich people live, and has the heaviest guild presence. The industrial zone, which is where soulstone refining and many other industrial operations take place, and you can find a heavy union presence. The slums, which is where the poor people live, the majority of Malifaux's population, and the aforementioned quarantine zone, which takes up a significant part of the city. If you were heading to Malifaux from Earth, you'd first pass through the breach a few miles north of the city, and then come to Malifaux Station. If you continued traveling south, you'd pass the Governor General's mansion and the Hanging Tree, before entering the city itself, in downtown. Downtown Malifaux contains the Guild Enclave, a massive fortified compound where most of the Guild's operations take place. You can also find Dewar's Library, a huge trove of books collected from ancient Malifaux that contain Neverborn history and magic secrets. The Star Theater, where one of Malifaux's most famous citizens, Colette Dubois, puts on amazing performances with her showgirls. And the MNSU Union Hall, which used to be the seat of power for the Union, which has since been moved to the Hollow Point Station, but Union Hall is still the base of operations for the Union's activities within the city. The industrial zone contains many factories and other industrial buildings, including the facilities of Geisel Industries, a guild company that supplies the organization with their weapons and armor. The industrial zone is also home to the soulstone refining facilities that the guild uses to process mined soulstones to prepare them to ship back to Earth. There's also Industry Station, a large train station through which passes the massive shipments of soulstones. Next, you might come across the northern and southern new construction zones, named so because they are the few areas in the city that have been built by the human settlers, as opposed to found and occupied. As with much of the city, the guild tends to ignore these areas and leave the people to fend for themselves. Most residents of the city live in one of the 8 slum districts, which vary dramatically in their level of safety and quality of life. The easterly slums, named so for a guild officer who was killed there, are the safest of the slum districts, and they're inhabited by low-level guild officers and the servants of wealthy downtown residents. They're also home to Ringside, a popular attraction that consists of boxing matches above ground and illegal gladiatorial fights to the death in the pits below ground. The Riverfront slums are the most dangerous of the slum districts, because they border a particularly dangerous part of the quarantine zone. Because of this, the guild withdrew from the district and fortified its 3 bridges across the river to prevent any of the horrors from the quarantine zone from getting to downtown, leaving the residents of the slums on their own. The district is also home to Red Chapel, a neighborhood that got famous after a series of brutal murders known as the Red Chapel Killings. However, some have been able to carve out a life there, and the Riverfront slums are home to captivating salvage and logistics, owned and operated by Leviticus. The Howling slums got their name from the loud groaning sounds that emanate from the sewers around the district. No one has been brave enough to investigate, but as a result, the district is plagued by poverty. This means that many things are sold cheaply, and residents of other slums can make the trip over to save money on their shopping. That is, if they're willing to brave the many gangs who struggle for control of the district. The central slums are the largest and the most varied of the slum districts, and most of its residents live a relatively safe and normal lifestyle. The population is clustered to the west and along the rail lines, and as you go further east, it becomes more and more uncivilized. The district is home to Silvercrest Sharpshooters, a firing range where, for a monthly fee, you can take shots at anything in the quarantine zone that wanders into range. The Little Kingdom arguably shouldn't be classified as a slum, because the crime rate is comparable to downtown Malifaux, or the industrial zone. The district is primarily inhabited by people from the 3 kingdoms, and it's well known for its many brothels, including the Key and Gong, where Governor General Kitchener's son was killed. It also has more gambling dens than the other districts, including the Honeypot Casino, and people in the know understand that most of the district is secretly controlled by the 10 Thunders. The Southgate slums have a heavy guild presence, in part because of the fact that Southgate Station, which leads out of the city, is located there. This has caused a more relaxed and carefree attitude in the district, but part of the safety is an illusion, because underground, Professor Albus von Stuck operates his University of Transmortis. It's not uncommon for people to be abducted and brought down to the university, to be dismembered and turned into one of his students. The southern slums are completely disconnected from the rest of the city, and the only way its residents can get anywhere else is to exit the city and walk around the outside wall until they get to another entrance. But this isolation goes 2 ways, and the guild presence there is light, except for around an aircar pylon that the guild heavily defends. The district is inhabited by many gangs that vie for control, but many of its residents are still able to eke out a decent life. The Burns have more or less been exiled from the city after the witch hunters went there to apprehend an 8-year-old girl who had manifested magical powers. The residents of the district tried to defend her, so the witch hunters shot her in the head, and the resulting riots saw the destruction of the aircar pylon that connected it to the rest of the city. The guild decided not to rebuild it, leaving the neighborhood cut off and isolated, and a few merchants are able to bring in the necessary supplies for the people to survive, but this causes prices to be extremely high. That's it for the inhabited parts of Malifaux City, and in a future episode, I'll talk about the quarantine zone and all the fun things you can find in there. If you like the format of this video, check out a recent video I did explaining everything we know about soulstones. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, check out the Discord and the Patreon, and special shout out to the extremely cool kids over on Patreon, the Steam Powered Scoundrels. Be sure to check out their podcast, and thanks for watching.